On the night of December 2nd, a drone strike was recorded in Chechnya against the Akhmat unit of the Russian National Guard. There has been no official comment from the Russian authorities. A position of the Akhmat Special Forces unit, participating in the war against Ukraine, was allegedly attacked in Gudermes, Chechnya. Footage published by local media shows powerful explosions and subsequent fires, but precise information on damage and casualties is still lacking. Local authorities have not provided any official comment. In its morning update, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that air defense systems operated in 8 regions overnight and intercepted 45 drones, including 4 in Chechen airspace. The agency recorded the most targets in the Bryansk region, 14. 8 UAVs were shot down in the Krasnodar region, 6 over Crimea. 5 drones were shot down in the Volgograd region, and 3 in the Black Sea. 2 UAVs were intercepted in the Rostov region, and 1 each in the Oryol, Lipetsk, and Tver regions. The attacks on Chechnya highlight the vulnerability of the republic's military facilities. Recently, Ukrainian drones have raided several military units in Chechnya. One of the UAVs crashed and exploded on the territory of the 141st Separate Special Motorized Rifle Regiment, Akhmat North, in Grozny. The building is engulfed in flames, and the fire has spread to an area exceeding 500 square meters. This military camp is located in the Baysangursky district of Grozny. Since 2022, the regiment has been participating in Russia's war against Ukraine, mainly serving as second-echelon troops. The regiment's soldiers also serve as personal security for Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic. Recently, a Dagestani fighter of the Akhmat Caucasus unit voluntarily surrendered to the Ukrainian military in the Zaporizhia region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Monday for talks, as part of a flurry of diplomatic activity aimed at brokering the terms for a potential ceasefire in the nearly 4-year-old conflict in Ukraine. According to Associated Press, Zelensky's visit to Paris followed a meeting between Ukrainian and U.S. officials in Florida on Sunday, which Secretary of State Marco Rubio described as productive. The two sides have worked to make revisions to a proposed U.S.-authored plan that was developed in negotiations between Washington and Moscow but criticized as being too weighted toward Russian demands. Those criticisms were perhaps most vehement from Ukraine's European allies who, while welcoming U.S. peace efforts, pushed back on key tenets of the plan. Ahead of his meeting with Zelensky on Monday, Macron's office said the two leaders would discuss conditions for a fair and lasting peace. Later, Macron's office said he and Zelensky held talks with other European partners including leaders from Britain, Germany, Poland, Italy, Norway, Finland, Denmark and the Netherlands. Also included in the talks were European Union officials Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. Macron and Zelensky also had phone calls with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Macron's office said. U.S. President Donald Trump has downplayed his administration's original 28-point peace framework, which would have imposed limits on the size of Ukraine's military, blocked the country from joining NATO and required Ukraine to give up territory, as a concept to be fine-tuned. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed Monday that Russian President Vladimir Putin would meet with U.S. Presidential Envoy Witkoff on Tuesday afternoon. Witkoff's role in the peace efforts came under scrutiny last week following a report that he coached Putin's foreign affairs advisor on how Russia's leader should pitch to Trump on the Ukraine peace plan. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas on Monday expressed concern that the US-Russia talks might end up with Ukraine having to make yet more concessions, like being pressured to surrender its territory. Peskov on Monday condemned Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil infrastructure over the weekend, including an attack on an oil terminal owned by the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC, and another that targeted 2 tankers in Turkish waters. Ukraine confirmed on Saturday it carried out the attacks. Meanwhile, Russia's Ministry of Defense said Russian forces had destroyed 32 Ukrainian drones overnight. The drones were shot down over 11 Russian regions, as well as the Sea of Azov, the ministry said. A Russian missile strike around midday on Monday killed 4 people and wounded 40 others, 11 critically, in the eastern city of Dnipro, according to the head of regional administration Vladislav Hevanenko. The strike hit the city center, damaging 4 residential high-rises, an educational facility and the storage facility of a humanitarian organization, said Dnipro's mayor, Boris Filatov, adding that search and rescue operations were ongoing. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia had fired 89 strike and decoy drones overnight Sunday before the attack on Dnipro, of which 63 drones were shot down or jammed. Overall in November, Russia fired 100 missiles of various types and 9,588 reconnaissance and strike drones into Ukraine, according to the Air Force's monthly report published Monday.
По инициативе украинской стороны вот такая очередная встреча была намечена и состоялась в Абу-Даби. С нашей стороны на ней присутствует.
This week could be a critical week in the war in Ukraine as US-led efforts to bring the nearly 4-year conflict to an end gather steam. A lot depends on Ukraine, but perhaps more depends on Russia, who the West has failed to influence since the invasion began, despite imposing a myriad of sanctions and providing Ukraine with substantial material support. In the latest round of diplomacy, a Ukrainian delegation flew to Miami over the weekend to meet US officials. After around 4 hours of talks, both sides described them as productive, but they failed to give any details. Now US envoy Steve Witkoff and other officials are due to fly to Moscow, where they're expected to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. But diplomats face an uphill struggle to try and reconcile Ukraine and Russia's red lines. Both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin have cautiously welcomed the outlines of the US plan. Still, officials on both sides have indicated a long road ahead because there seem to be major sticking points that appear unresolved, such as Ukraine ceding territory and how to ensure Ukraine's future security.
Suffering, and I'm sure the Ukrainian side, I know they do as well, they want peace. But it's also about securing an end to the war that leaves Ukraine sovereign and independent and with an opportunity at real prosperity.
Président,